Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Derek Meier. Derek, first of all, thank you so much for visiting with us today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us here, and I appreciate it.
Derek, what was your role in the production of Mayor of the Night?
So I was the production designer, and I was head of wardrobe, and I did set construction, and just generally, I also was the sound guy, so I operated the boom pole and collect the sound, and then pretty much anything else that needed to be done in the moment that I could do to help out.
So tell us about production design. How did you get into that, at least in the film realm?
So on the production design, the first thing was like just kind of talking with CJ over his vision and what he was looking for and the setting. And of course, it was Sherlock Holmes, so it was pretty straightforward, late 1800s, what we were looking for. But then it's trying to find what did things look like and what did people dress like and what were things that people were using. And we have a lot of influences today from movies and from different shows that are all not really correct. Like, everything gets to be a little bit steampunky, and we were looking more of a late Victorian style, but a traditional style. So trying to find photographs isn't easy, right? This was photographs were around at the time, but not it wasn't just everybody that had a picture taken of them. So trying to find a wardrobe and to find how things should look, like, you had to go back to, like, paintings, artists of the time, and see what they were painting because they were painting what they saw. So you could go to impressionism, you could go to just looking at paintings and then looking at catalogs. You could find catalogs on things that were available for people to buy. You could find catalogs for dresses and for suits and what things were wearing, what people were wearing. And then going through that on the production design and wardrobe part, finding things and trying to get that look versus saying, watch whatever movie's popular at the time and let's make it look like that. That was somebody else's design and somebody else's idea, and we didn't want to mimic that.
So I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes aficionado. I'm in the middle of a podcast series of each of the short stories, novels. I started the movies, not intentionally, but it looks like I'm going down that path too. And I think anyone who has any familiarity with Sherlock Holmes has an image of Holmes in their mind. One is the image of Holmes himself, right or wrong, with the deerstalker and pipe, but also the atmosphere of London and the time that he lived in the late 1890s late 1800s, as you said, in the Victorian era. Does that familiarity of everyone with Sherlock Holmes make your job harder or easier?
That would definitely depend upon the storyline. Like, where are you at? If we needed to be in the streets of London, that would be very difficult in Kerrville, Texas to pull off. So we were looking at what we had available and then how can we get the right look out of that? If we're in nature, we can get a nature look, right? We may not have the exact trees, but we can be in the woods. If we're in an old house, then we focus on the house and not the windows, right? We're not wanting to see what's outside of the house. We just want to see the interior of the house itself. Um, Anything that we had to do where we had to kind of recreate a little bit more what you're talking about, like in the streets of London, like focus on one side, because obviously we couldn't make a huge alleyway between two buildings, right? We don't have those here. But we could take a building and then create something to look like an alleyway. And then then you're just strategic with your filming. What are you showing and what are you not showing?
The story itself explores an area of Holmes that I don't think I'm not sure it's been explored, but if it has, it's not been fully explored the way you guys are doing it. How did that storyline, and I'm gonna say that darkness, really influence the production of the sets?
Yes, it's a very good question. As you read the novels, it doesn't, they don't go exactly the direction we went with it. But if you look and you kind of look at Arthur Conan Doyle's life, and at one point, if anybody knows Sherlock Holmes, he killed him off and then he brought him back. Right. So he was obviously done with him. And but the fans wanted more and his mom wanted more. So he started writing about him again. And in those, there was a big transition in Sherlock Holmes from the stories from before, was it The Final Solution? And
Yes.
then after, right? All of a sudden, he was a lot chippier and happier, and everybody liked him more afterwards. So there was a big change in there. So it was kind of obvious that Doyle was okay with his mentality changing a little bit. So whenever we were looking at those influences, we were looking at what was the direction that Doyle wanted to go, and you can see that. And so then we just kind of wanted to explore a darker and deeper side. And if you look at reading the novels, if you're looking at his life, you can see that there was a lot of drug use, there was a lot of violence, right? You just start thinking about detectives and what they see today, right? It's no different, right? They saw a lot of murder. They saw a lot of gruesome, terrible things that they walked up on. That was your day-to-day life. What effect would that have on you? It doesn't really necessarily how strong your constitution is. It's going to create some mental imagery in your mind that you're not really going to be able to get rid of. And it will create demons in yourself. And then if you pair that with the drug use and alcoholism and all the other things that we see in the stories, it kind of was like, let's look at this and explore that and let's see what would happen to a normal person. And so that's the direction we went with it. And so those were the big influences on going that route. And then just kind of looking at that. And then we were able to spend more time on the production side, what would his house look like? So you can go and it's one of the nice things about the community. It's not a nice thing, but we have a lot of rehabilitation centers, areas in Kerrville. So we know people that have been through rehab and we can talk to them and say, what was happening in your life at this time? And so we could get some insight on where he would probably be at. And so we could look and then design things around that. He wouldn't have brand new nice furniture. It would be old and beaten down, right? He wouldn't be cleaning the house. He wouldn't be doing a lot of things that we would take for granted, and he was alone. So that influenced a lot of that on the overall look towards that part of the film.
I've gone through that journey myself, so I have some idea about that. But the other thing that intrigued me is, for better or worse, over the last 20 or 25 years, we've learned a lot more about PTSD in this country. And PTSD is not new. Soldiers from World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea all had it. But it was never talked about. Now it's much more open. So I was really interested to see if that would be part of the exploration of what happens to even an incredibly smart person when he sees all this trauma, when he sees the violence, when he sees the gruesomeness, and that's going to affect even a genius at some point.
Yes, and I don't wanna give anything away,
But
but definitely the PTSD is there, and you see that in nightmare sequences. You That's one of the things that we don't always think about, but whenever we have a nightmare, it isn't necessarily anything we've ever seen before in our lives, but it's often the accumulation of many things that come in our brain creates this thing, right? And so we do show that through different nightmare sequences, different things, and that's kind of where a little bit more of the horror side comes in. Uh, and yeah, and him working through that.
I'm very interested in your creative process. A little bit earlier in the pod, you told us about you'd visit with the director and try to get a sense of his vision, and then you would go off and research. But how do you come up with your vision? And then is that in collaboration with the director?
Yes and no. That's super vague, right? But
I'm a lawyer.
but
He knows that's a perfect answer.
it's a
It
perfect answer.
depends.
Maybe, yeah. So yeah, so my creative process can go all over the place, and it will at times. And as we're talking, as CJ and I would go over and talk about scenes and, getting the overall idea, what do you want it to look like? And then I will go different areas depending upon what we're bringing into that scene, different time periods of the world, right? Different times in history, different things. What do we want? As long as it will fit with the story. So you can't bring in anything from that's futuristic into it, right? I mean, it's not that type of a movie. It's set in the late 1800s, and anything that we do, we wanted to make sure that the people at that time would have been capable of making it, or it could have happened. Uh, so you have to limit yourself some. And so then we would start to kind of create those barriers, and then my creative process would work inside of that, which helps a lot. Otherwise, it's really easy to go off on a tangent.
So what is your creative process inside of that?
I like to just explore and look. I'm a researcher. I like to just I mean, it's so easy today to go online and just with a few keywords, and if you're strategic on what your keywords are, to just find pictures, find images, find different things that people what has been done, what are we trying to do, what do we want to mimic it to look like, and then just working through my mind on what do I want it to look like. And so going you looking at if we're building this picture, then what colors should people be wearing? Because you wanna make sure not everybody's wearing blue. And so what are we dressing women in? What are we dressing men in? And then depending on what the scene is, what we're dressing people isn't necessarily what they would traditionally be wearing. And so you can have a lot of fun with that depending on what the scene is. I don't wanna give too much away, and it's easy to, but then just kind of building that picture and looking at it and being able to say, "Does it look good or does it look not look good?" And then having a few other eyes to look at it and see what they feel about it.
What is a typical day for a set production designer when the movie is being filmed?
While the movie's being filmed, it's a little bit a lot of the stuff has been done, right? So a lot of that is pre-production. And so on the day that we're filming, that's where I was able to collect audio. I was able to hold the boom bowl and to collect audio and do other things. The wardrobe had been picked, the set had been built, had been done, everything was ready to go. It was just being a part of making sure that from scene to scene, everything was reset exactly how it was. And being a part of the set, doing the set design on the production side, then I had a pretty good mental image of what things look like. But then you have people that are helping, we're taking pictures, we're looking at it, and we're resetting everything. So on while we're filming, and then it's also planning for the next thing. But while we're filming, it's for me, it was kind of a different area than just the production design and wardrobe part. Like I said, that was a lot of pre-production, so a lot of that had been done already.
I'd like to explore how you got into production design and maybe a little bit about your journey through filmmaking in that role.
So it was kind of, I guess, a little bit more about me. I was a mechanic for 10 years after high school. I've been building, remodeling homes for over 20 years now. And I've being built a custom home builder, I get to be really creative in that, like helping people pick things. Some homes I've built, people didn't know exactly what they wanted to put here or different areas. So I was able to be creative with that and talking with them and designing things in their home. I've been doing theater since high school. I go to museums, I do all right? I mean, so I have a large pool of stuff to pull from. And on the film that we did before we started this, Eyes of a Roman, it was filmed on my family's property, as was most of Sherlock. And I was more a part of the production design than I intended to be. But there was things that just needed to be done. And this is one thing in the indie film world when you're a small filmmaker and you you're very limited on what you have available. If somebody gets a better gig, then they're leaving and they may not say anything. So all of a sudden there's more stuff to do. So I ended up in on Eyes of a Roman doing quite a bit of the set building, being involved in the production design part more than I thought I would have been. So after Eyes of a Roman, we started talking about Sherlock, the Sherlock film. And so we had been working on that for a while, and then we were gonna do like a teaser, so like a 45-second teaser, and which ended up in becoming the Sherlock Nightmare short that's almost 4 minutes long. But I did all of the production design and wardrobe on that. And then as we were going towards getting closer and closer to the film, we were kind of just talking about it, and it just made sense that I would do the production design on this film. So this was my first time to be the production designer on it. But it just kind of morphed into that.
As I mentioned, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I really wanted to end by asking you, when doing a production with one of the most beloved characters in all of fiction, or at least if you're a mystery and detective person, do you feel an additional sense of pressure? Do you feel it honored to be able to work on a Sherlock Holmes story? Is it you want to get it right, or do you just want to give it your best effort because that's just the way you are anyway?
It's like it's a little bit of all of that. I mean, I would hope that everybody would always want to give their best effort, but being a Sherlock film, yes, there's another layer to that because people that are Sherlock fanatics are gonna watch this and be like, "No, it wouldn't be like that. We don't know. He never ended his life." He did, but he brought him back, and then it never really it only went so far, and so we're coming in after all of that. But also to try to make people as happy as we can, I'll say pay attention because there's lots of Easter eggs in the film. We try to give nods where we can to the stories, and doing that helps us to build the Sherlock Holmes that we are portraying. All of those stories are a part of him, and so having those stories helps so much because it also kind of created those barriers that we needed, right? We needed the boundaries. We needed to know, would he do this? Would he not? And then we just in not only in the writing and as well as just imagery in the film, and this is part of the detective part of it too. Pay attention, and you're not going to get everything the first time around. So you're going to have to watch the film multiple times to try to get all the little Easter eggs and all the things that we put into it because he was a detective. So pay attention.
Derek, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode, but I want to thank you for coming down and greatly look forward to seeing the film.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.